Folks, and I thought today we'd talk a little bit about your running form, and the reason being lots more comments than normal about people saying that they want to be working on their running form. I think primarily because we're coming to the end of the racing season for a lot of people. And heck, who wouldn't want to have better running form, which means you're going to be able to go faster for the same effort as you had before. So running form is very important. But unfortunately, sometimes we don't work on the right things when it comes to running form. So a common thing will be, well, I'm working on running more upright. So I'm really trying to concentrate on that. By and large, concentrating on what you're doing isn't going to equate into having better running form, at least for very long. Here would be kind of a little analogy around that. So let's say you've got your car and the front passenger side tire is low on air. So when you're driving, that car is going to want to drift over to the side. Now you can compensate for that as long as you're thinking about it. If you just steer a little bit the other way, your car will go nice and straight. But as soon as you stop thinking about that, your car is going to veer off to the side, because the problem isn't about you thinking about how you want your car to be straight. The problem is you need to put more air into that tire. And once you put more air into the tire, then the car for the most part is going to go straight and you don't need to make a lot of adjustments. It's the same thing with trying to run upright. If you're lacking the core strength to keep your body upright, you can probably run upright as long as you're thinking about it. But as soon as you stop thinking about it, and that's usually going to happen within just a couple of minutes, all of a sudden you're not going to be running upright anymore. So what are some of the keys that you need to work on to make sure you have good running form? So since I mentioned that already, let's talk about, so strength is one of the first ones, and I said balanced because sometimes you have muscular imbalances. You'll have one side that is stronger than the other, just like one tire might be low on air. So you want to have good strength, but you want that strength to be balanced. But strength is probably the number one thing, especially as you're doing the longer distances. So even though strength's always important, much less so in a 5K than, say, in a marathon where you're going to be out there for a very long time and you really need to be able to sustain that. So making sure you are free of muscular imbalances and you have the strength is going to help you have better running form without even having to think about it. Next, you need the flexibility or the right range of motion to complete everything with running. So if your hip flexors are really tight, you're not going to get the right range of motion behind you and that hip extension when you're running. You don't need to be this super flexible person to run. In fact, running tends to make you tight, but you do need enough flexibility to have the right range of motion. And the fact is, if you don't have that, you can think about it until you're blue in the face. You're not going to have the best running form you can when you're restricted in your range of motion. You also need to have mobility. Now, flexibility and mobility are very related, but they're different. So mobility is to be able to smoothly execute that. So a lot of things we do for mobility are going to be, say, foam rolling or massaging to work out the knots and the kinks so that we get that good range of motion with our flexibility. So mobility is a little bit different. So we had strength, we had flexibility, we had mobility. If you were perfect in all those, I'll guarantee you're a much better runner already from a running form standpoint. And then the final thing we have is stability. So what is stability? Stability is the ability to use that strength, use it to control all of that. Probably the best example I can give of that is that I will do this one exercise on something called a TRX, which are these bands that hang from let's say the ceiling. And I might start in a cross and you lower yourself back to a position like this. And as I'm getting tired towards the end of maybe the third set, towards the end, I will drop a little bit. I lack that stability to be able to control that all the way through and get that motion in there. So stability is very important as well. So strength, flexibility, mobility, and stability are keys to having good running form. And I'm here to tell you, if you're doing great with all those, chances are your running form is really, really good. Now, how can you figure out, well, what do I need to work on? How do I know? So I've got a few keys that you could look at. First is, if you have iOS, I am sorry, they do not make this available for Android. I'm not sure why. I think it has to do with some of the things inside of an iPhone that you're using to do the measurement. But the Saucony Stride Lab app, get Saucony Stride Lab, it will take you through a number of tests. And as a result of those tests, it will come back and tell you in all those areas what are things that you could be working on. It will even give you things to do on several times a week to work on improving those areas and then do a retest on that. So if you have iOS, Saucony Stride Lab is a great way to do that. You can also, there's a couple of books Anatomy for Runners. I said runner, but it's Anatomy for Runners by Jay Deshary is a very good book. It has a lot of tests in there you can do as well. In fact, Jay Deshary is the guy who worked with Saucony to make that app that I just talked about. But he's got tests that you can do. And again, we'll give you ideas on what you can do with that test. And then there's another one by Jonathan Beverly called Your Best Stride. Very similar to Anatomy for Runners. It's not quite as deep or technical as Anatomy for Runners. But once again, we'll give you a lot of different tests and things you can do to say, hey, what's keeping me from having the right strength, mobility, etc., and how do I work on those? And then finally, you could also get a gait analysis. Go in and you pay somebody. It's going to be usually about $150, I think, for a typical gait analysis. And they do you on the video or the treadmill. But in all cases, it's not just identify that, hey, you're not running upright or you don't have the right hip extension or whatever that is, but what is keeping you from doing that? Is it a strength issue? Is it a range of motion issue, flexibility, is it a stability issue? And then work on those things. So running form, again, it is very important. It's great to be able to go a little bit faster for the same energy, but you can't just think about it. You have to figure out why you're not doing it.